Good morning. Well, I was supposed to preach this lesson back at September 24th. So I've been ready for a long time. Some of you may remember I tested positive for COVID on the 23rd, so I couldn't be with you, and that meant I had to cancel and reschedule my eye surgery. And so gotten that all done now. I had cataracts removed, and after they don't do both eyes at the same time. So after they did the first eye, I was talking to Maureen about it, and she was asking me about it, and I told her about it. And of course, we know Maureen's been through a lot with her procedures, with her vision and things. And she says, that's nothing. Wait till they shoot lasers in your eyes. So mine wasn't that bad. It was a lot simpler than that. So grateful that they didn't have to shoot me with lasers. So what I want to visit with us about this morning is why people quit going to church. Now, I'm anticipating some of you are thinking, well, Rudy, with your attendance the past few months, I'm not sure you're really qualified to speak to this right now. And I will confess, Kathy and I have been taking advantage of not being tied to the pulpit every Sunday and doing some traveling and doing some things with family and things that sometimes we've had to miss over the years. So that might not change so much. I'm just gonna tell you about that. But I hope you know us well enough that when we're gone, we're worshiping someplace else. We just don't take a break from church. That's always been important to us, and I do appreciate having the opportunity to worship with other congregations and hear about what they're struggling with and what they're doing well, and seeing those different things. We often are at Southwest there with Caleb and Omaha, and they're trying out a new preacher today, so be praying for that congregation. As you know, their past preacher, Jim, they lost to a heart attack some time ago now, and I know I had shared that with you when that had happened. So that's always a big deal, as we know quite well here, and I'm just not... been so long since I've had to fight with this thing. I'm sorry, it's distracting there. Of course, that Russ is worried today because, trying to keep up with me as I'm moving up here on the camera, I know it was a challenge for him. So I might be more lively than normal. But as I've been doing some research on this question, why people quit going to church, there's a lot out there. It's a big topic. And we know that our numbers aren't what they used to be. And it's not just us, but religion as a whole across the country is experiencing declining numbers. And it's just interesting to me to look at the why. Because I really feel like if we don't know the why, how do we address it? We need to understand the why. And so just some random lists that I came across I want to share with you to kind of set up our conversation today. But one reason that people quit going to church is they got out of the habit. They got out of the practice of doing it. Anybody remember COVID? The COVID event. Quite honestly, for the longest time, myself included, we blamed COVID on our declining numbers. And that's really not true. COVID didn't do that to us. COVID accelerated some things that happened. And certainly COVID provided the opportunity to get out of the habit of attending regular services for a while. That's certainly true. But Nathan made a comment once when a bunch of us guys were standing out there in the foyer talking smart, solving the problems as we often do. And the comment he made about COVID is, he said, COVID's not what's causing this, but COVID is revealing our true colors. And I think that's a lot of truth to that. And I think that's a good way to look at it, is that COVID accelerated some things that were already happening that were causing the numbers to drop from what they were in healthier times, if you will. Sometimes people quit going to church because they've graduated high school. That's a real thing, and we've experienced that in our own family, in this family. I've seen that many times. Our kids graduate, they go off, and all of a sudden, church just isn't a part of their life anymore. But I would also add to that as well is sometimes just those life-changing events lead to people quit going to church too. The loss of a spouse, a divorce, a marriage sometimes is the reason that happens when we marry people who aren't like-minded in regards to our faith, and that can draw us away. Another reason is they decided they didn't like the institutional church. Now, this is really a significant point here, and it talks more about and leads to the conversation about the differences between the generations. Help me with his name. Cluey? You know who I'm talking about? He's in... Pardon? Well, I'm trying to figure that out, Dave. Help me. Young man from Iowa who's a teacher down there at Sunset now? Okay, thank you. You guys know who I'm talking about? Great big kid. Remember, last time he was here, he was talking to us about those generational differences. You remember that? The differences between us baby boomers who do have it all figured out and younger generations. And that is really having a toll on our church numbers, the differences in those thinking between generations. And of course, often, we tend to look at it, well, you're wrong and I'm right. And it really isn't necessarily about being right or wrong. It's just different. And one of those differences is us as baby boomers, man, we were into the institutions, the institution of America, the institution of the church, the institution of school. And we did that with pride. Where the younger generations, when they hear that, something's missing for them. And what's missing is the more intimacy between relationships. Now, it's not that us baby boomers aren't into relationships, but it's just that slight difference of thinking, if you will, and to try to simplify a very complicated idea that what gets focused on. And when people don't feel like they fit anymore because of that generational thinking or some of those philosophies, they're not comfortable with that. And unfortunately, sometimes they just quit going to church. They were hurt at church. That might be a reason why somebody quit going to church. They say they couldn't find a church to meet their needs. They had a need and felt like the church didn't meet it, so they quit going. Or maybe, and it's not necessarily that they went someplace else, but they just quit going altogether. They never felt connected in the church. As I said, there's a lot of research out there about all of this, and one of the research papers that I've downloaded to read now that I can read again with my eye surgery all done, talks about faith and relationships. And it's amazing. I don't think we always see this, but there's a lot of loneliness in the church. And it's causing people to quit coming. Loneliness is a terrible, terrible thing. Isolation is a terrible thing. And when you're part of a congregation where you feel isolated and lonely, what's to keep you going? And so I'm anxious to learn more about that idea as well. They didn't give to the church. They didn't give to the church. They weren't in. Another way to think about it is they weren't invested in the church. And it's not about giving money. I mean, that's an example of that, but it's about giving time. It's about giving service. It's about being together for fellowship, giving of yourself, sacrificing of yourself. And when you don't do that, it's kind of easy just to step away from it. Another reason people quit going to church is that when their favorite preacher left, so did they, or a family that they were well connected, or a friend, or whatever. And sometimes when those connections in a body are somewhat limited, and then those connections are gone, again, you feel like, I'm not really sure I'm a part of this group. And so it's easy to quit going. They moved and never went back to church. They got disconnected because of a new job, a new opportunity, relocating for whatever reason it might be, and then they just never got back to church. Now, you have probably, as we're going through this, thought of all kinds of reasons that would go up here, and I'm just not going to keep going on because there are a lot of them. While I was working on this lesson and visiting with my golf partner that I played golf league with, he had mentioned that they quit going to church because the congregation that they were a part of over there in Manchester became too political. They just didn't think church should be so political, and they weren't comfortable with that anymore. And boy, we've seen a lot of that, haven't we? And unfortunately, my opinion, as we get closer to election, we're going to see more and more of that. And my opinion, I think it is distracting when it comes to our relationship with God and our relationship with each other. I want to make this point before I go any further because I think it's really the basis where I'm trying to come from in this lesson this morning. And it's found, I think, best in Hebrews chapter 10, beginning at verse 24. It says, "And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works." Encouraging each other, how important that is in our relationships. Not neglecting to meet together as some are in the habit, but encouraging one another, and all the more how important it is day after day to be able to do that. And I really think that's a very pointed statement about as we get closer to the judgment day, how important it is that we are there to support and encourage each other, that we not step away from the blessings that we receive through the blood of Christ. We kind of talked a little bit about that this morning in Dave's class. We talked about the significance of being supported by each other, and the lesson from Daniel about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel, and how they supported each other. Do you have that support in your life from fellow Christians? How important that is. But what I want to take away, from this text is, can we agree that it is God's expectations that we meet together, that we physically meet together? Is that a misapplication of that text? Absolutely not. It is God's expectation. And if it is God's expectation, is it reasonable to say that that is a command that we have from God? To meet together. And with numbers depleting, what a task we have in front of us. First of all, ourselves be faithful in that expectation, but to set an example of others to be faithful as well. Along with that idea too, and this was referenced in our class this morning too from Ecclesiastes chapter 4, but woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. You know, that's part of the reason why we need to get together, is because on our own we are weak, miserable, and discouraged, I heard. We are losers. We can't do it on our own. And not losers in the good way, like I call Gilbert. By the way, your birthday's on Halloween? That explains a lot. Wow. That explains a lot. Happy early birthday. Trick or treat. Yes. So, yeah. All right, let's bring it back. Well, I'd like to add something else to the list of why people leave the church. And it's this. It stinks. When I came across this text in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, I don't think I ever preached it before like I'm going to today. I'm not sure if I ever preached it at all. Probably had somewhere along the line of almost 30 years of preaching, but I don't recall it. But one of the reasons that I think people leave the church is because it stinks. Consider this text. For we are the aroma of Christ to God among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. To one a fragrance from death to death, and to the other a fragrance from life to life. Now I find this rather interesting, this description of us as a smell, first of all. Okay? And I want you to realize something here too. It's not, I don't believe, a physical smell that we can smell. Okay? It's not like that. And so I find it interesting that this language is even used. Looking at the Greek terms for aroma there, that's the term that I've always seen in a positive expression, most often towards God, the aroma that we are to God as obedient children. And then the word fragrance here can go either way. It can be that sweet smelling thing that attracts you, to something positive, that smell of a flower that attracts a bee to it, that kind of thing. Or, as it says there, a deadly fume. To me, one of the most disgusting smells is that dead, rotting flesh, right? And as soon as I say it, you can almost smell it, can't you? I think we've all, have smelled that. It's just disgusting and really quite powerful. So the question that we need to answer through this lesson today that I want you to consider is, what do you smell like to those around you? What do we smell like to the world around us? And again, it's not that, that physical smell. I mean, you guys have heard me talk about this before. One of the greatest things about my job as an elementary school principal is the interactions with the students. I can't walk down the hall without getting a hug, a high five, a fist bump. I got a new student, a little girl that started school at Lambert Elementary, and she comes up to me and we do a finger tap, and others are seeing that and it's kind of catching on. But lots of times when I get that hug, kids will often say, "You smell good. Why do you smell so good?" And I always say, "Because I shower." Especially to some of them, I really emphasize that. And I've told you this before, but it just pops into my head. That one little girl, she hugged me one morning. She says, "Oh, you smell like my mommy's boyfriend." Apparently he showered too, I guess. I don't know. The power of smell. I want you to think about that. The power of smell. The power of smell provides safety. I mean, one of the greatest defenses that we have against eating bad meat is that rancid smell, right? There's a funny story about my Uncle Ray, who has lost his sense of smell. And years ago now, he was, the way that they found out that his sense of smell was gone, not just diminished, but gone. My aunt is woken up one morning to this terrible, filthy, disgusting, sickening, nauseous smell of rancid meat being cooked. And so she goes to explore, and my uncle likes to cook, and he's frying up bacon. And it's bad bacon. And of course, you know what happens when us men are frying bacon. I mean, we're setting some aside and that's going. He's eating this rancid bacon. He has no idea. Of course, my aunt, she's like, she can't even hardly get to the kitchen to warn him, quit eating it. And so whenever we get together for a family picnic or something like that, and Uncle Ray made something, be careful. Because his sense of smell, when it comes to spicing things up, it's not good. So, but it's that safety that it provides. It also, think about odors. It's a strong evoker. Certain odors spark strong emotions, influence behavior, and trigger memories. I'm sure there's things that you smell in your life that just take you back to years and years ago. And one of them for me is hot asphalt. That's not necessarily a pleasant smell, but every time I smell it, it takes me back to Pine Island, Minnesota as an elementary student on the playground. We didn't have a grassy area, but we had this huge playground, asphalt covered. And when it was hot, you could just smell that. And that was a great time in my life. I enjoyed it, dodgeball up against the brick wall and getting my head banged against, all that stuff. It was great. But every time that hot asphalt smell takes me to every time. I hate to admit this, but I'm an old smoker, and sometimes when I catch a whiff of somebody else smoking, it takes me back to when I used to enjoy smoking. And I didn't say it was a good thing, but it's that memory. It's there, and it's automatic. Smelling, a rainy fall afternoon sometimes will take me back to the woods and hunting, and think about that. I'm sure there's memories. I smell the lake, and it takes me to Bible camp in northern Minnesota. All those things. It can be both positive and negative, but smell does that for us. Attraction and repulsion. Kathy will tell you this. When I get filthy, dirty, been working all day and sweaty and stinky, what do I try to do? I come in the house, try to give her a hug and a kiss, right? You think she likes that? What do you think she's saying? Get away from me. Go take a shower. Don't even touch me till you get out of the shower. That kind of thing. That attraction and repulsion, that just happens between people. And you think about it. There's people in your life, and you can remember how they smell, and it might push you away, and it might draw you to them. The power of smell explains why I think this language is used here in the New Testament, the aroma of Christ. Now, of course, it's really rooted strongly, too, in the Old Testament sacrifices of burning the incense and things like that. But the power of smell, I think, explains that language, the aroma of Christ. It's not that we have an actual odor, but that our relationships, our interactions with each other and the world around us has a powerful influence. And we must do everything that we can to make sure that influence is positive. So how do we do that? How do we smell like Christ? Well, actually, we already had one text that was shared with us here, I believe, right before the offering. And this was it, Ephesians 5. And walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. And from Philippians 4:18, I have received full payment and more. I am well supplied, having received from Epaphroditus the gifts you sent, a fragrant offering, a sacrifice acceptable and pleasing to God. So how do we smell like Christ? We live like Christ. We walk in love. We walk in obedience. We're servants. We know the answer to this question. It's not hard. But this whole idea about being the aroma of Christ just gives us, I think, more insight to how significant our interactions are to each other. How we can be so repulsive to some and attractive to others. Here's a group of Christians that smelled like Christ. You know how important this verse is to me, and for how many times have I brought this before this congregation over 10 years? Quite frequently. Let's read it again. From Acts chapter 2, beginning at verse 42, it says, "And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles, and all who believed were together." And all who believed were together. And all who believed were what?
Together.
They were together. You see, there's that expectation again from God. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple court and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. As I was reviewing this lesson and getting ready for this morning, another thought came to my mind that I just want to throw out here concerning this text. If we look at that last part of verse 47 here again, see if I remember how to do any of this. Praising God and having favor with all the people, and the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. This is, I think, I never thought about it this way, but look at the pattern for evangelism in this text. And I say it's about that because of the statement there about the growth that they were experiencing. What were they doing? What evangelistic thing were they doing that promoted this growth? Gathering. Eating together. Just simply being together with some frequency. And Sunday morning and Wednesday night doesn't even get close to the frequency. Doesn't even get close. Now, we know there's more to this. I don't want to oversimplify this. But I think sometimes when we struggle with the idea, what do we need to be doing to replenish these empty chairs? And part of the answer, I think, maybe more significant part of the answer to this question about what we need to be doing is getting our relationships right. Because that's what the world was seeing. That's what the world was smelling. And it was attractive to them. It was attractive to them. Having favor with all the people. And it happened because of the relationships here. The frequency of being together. Meeting each other's needs. Now, I got to be a little careful with this when it talks about selling all of their stuff. I got a lot of stuff. You know, Caleb and I were working on the roof yesterday. He made the mistake of coming home, and so I put him to work. And we're working up there and had to fix the gutter. And if you've seen my house, it's a long ways up there. Kathy couldn't hardly stand to watch us out there, but I'm up there working on that and fixing that, and Caleb had made a comment about some of my tools and stuff, and lamenting some of his tools got stolen some time ago, and I said, you know, if I rolled off this roof, you might come into a lot of nice tools, you know. So he grabs a hold of my belt loop, and I'm like, you know what, if this 230-pound guy's going to roll off the roof, that belt loop's going to break. That ain't going to help at all. But again, though, what part of the verse do you struggle with? Isn't this a form of evangelism we could really lean into? Please someone say amen. Please someone say it like you mean it. Yeah. Having favor with all the people, it just doesn't feel like we have that anymore. And I'm talking religion in general, okay? That's not a point at us, but we're part of that whole picture, right? Right? So how do we reclaim that? Well, that example in Acts 2 is the relationships rate. This is where we start. This is where we start. So here's your invitation call today. You need to wash the stink off. Ever had an invitation call like that before? You need to wash the stink off. I don't know how that applies to you, but you need to think about that. Is there some stink in your life that you need to wash off? Has your behavior, your words, your actions, your failure to say what needs to be said, your failure to do what needs to be done, repelled someone from finding the Lord? Then you need to wash the stink off. Today, if we can help you in any way, whether it's washing the stink off or you're struggling with something in your life, we want to be there for you. We're not mind readers. So if you have a need, now's an opportunity to share it with us. Let us serve you. Won't you come while together we stand and sing this song of encouragement?